They say the ocean keeps its dead. If you listen closely at night, you can hear them singing. I never believed it, until I heard it for myself. I used to work at a lighthouse on Blackgrave Isle. It was a lonely place, surrounded by nothing but the ocean. My job was simple: keep the light on so ships didn't crash. Most nights were quiet, but the night this started, nothing was normal. A storm hit hard. The wind howled, the waves slammed against the rocks, and the whole lighthouse shook. I was at the top, watching the ocean, when I saw something strange. Shapes were moving in the water. They were too big to be fish, but they weren't human either. They circled the island, rising and falling with the waves. Then I heard it, the song. It wasn't like any music I've ever heard. It got inside my head. It made me feel calm, like I could fall asleep right there. But it wasn't peaceful. It was cold. It felt wrong. I covered my ears, but it didn't help. The sound wasn't outside. It was inside me. I locked every door and window and waited for the storm to pass. When the sun came up, I thought it was over. I was wrong. Later that day, some fishermen arrived from the mainland. They looked off. Their eyes were empty. They said they heard the song too. They talked about seeing women in the water, pale skin, long hair, but not beautiful. They were swollen and dead. By evening, the first body washed up on the shore. It was a fisherman named Ewan. I knew him. His skin was pale and bloated. His chest was torn open, like something had ripped its way out. His face was stuck in a scream, but his eyes, they were black, like ink. Thick, black tears ran down his cheeks. By nightfall, more bodies started washing up, dozens of them, all with the same black eyes. That's when the first one moved. I watched from the cliffs as Ewan's body started to twitch. His bones cracked, bending in ways they shouldn't. His mouth opened, and the song came pouring out. I ran. I thought running would save me. It didn't. I made it back to the lighthouse, slammed the door, and locked it. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely breathe. I peeked out the window, hoping I imagined it, but I didn't. More bodies were moving. They pulled themselves off the rocks with stiff, jerky movements. Their skin hung loose and gray, like it was ready to fall off. Black liquid oozed from their mouths and eyes. And the sound. God, the sound. That horrible song poured out of them. Soft at first, but it kept getting louder. It wasn't just noise. It got inside your head. It made you want to listen. I could feel it pulling at me, telling me to go outside, to go to the water. I pressed my hands to my ears, but it didn't help. The song wasn't coming from outside. It was inside me. I looked down at the shore. More people were walking toward the water. Fishermen, families, even children. They looked calm, like they were in a dream. They just kept walking until the waves pulled them under. I could see their hands reaching up from the water, but no one screamed. No one ever screamed. I knew I had to get off the island. I grabbed my keys and ran for the boat. But when I got to the dock, I stopped cold. They were waiting for me. Dozens of them stood in the shallow water, staring at me with those black, empty eyes. Their mouths hung open, the song pouring out. I backed away slowly, but the water started to boil. The waves rose higher, and then I saw her. She was bigger than the rest, almost twice my size. Her skin was bloated and blue, her hair tangled with seaweed. She stared at me with pure hatred, and she smiled. She raised one pale, rotting hand, and the waves slammed into the dock. Wood cracked. I hit the ground hard, gasping for air as water filled my lungs. I scrambled to my feet and ran back to the lighthouse, slamming the door behind me. The singing never stopped. It echoed through the walls, through my chest, through my skull. I couldn't think. I just sat there with my back against the door, shaking, waiting for it to end. But it didn't. I stayed in the lighthouse all night, shaking, sweating, waiting for it to stop. But it never did. The song just kept going, crawling inside my head. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't think. I just sat there, listening to it. And the worst part, I started to like it. That's when I realized what the song really was. It wasn't just calling people to the water. It was changing them. I could feel it happening to me. My skin felt cold. My breath came slower. My heart pounded in my chest. But it wasn't fear anymore. It was hunger. I stumbled to the bathroom and looked in the mirror. My eyes, they were turning black. I had to end it. I grabbed the radio and tried calling for help. But the static was filled with the song. I smashed it. I ran to the top of the lighthouse, hoping I could signal a ship. But there was nothing. Just the ocean. And then I saw them. Hundreds of them, floating just beneath the surface. Their pale faces stared up at me, mouths wide open, singing. The waves churned as more bodies rose from the deep. They climbed onto the rocks, dragging themselves toward the lighthouse. Their eyes never blinked. Their mouths never closed. I heard glass shatter downstairs. They were inside. I grabbed a knife from the desk, but my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold it. I ran to the stairs, but it was too late. They were already there, crawling up the steps, wet, cold hands reaching for me. Their skin peeled when they moved. The smell of salt and rot filled the air. I stabbed the first one, but it didn't even flinch. It just kept coming, black liquid pouring from the wound. I kicked it down the stairs, but there were more behind it. So many more. I ran to the top of the lighthouse, the highest place I could go. The door was old, barely holding against the weight of their bodies. I could hear them clawing at the wood, laughing, singing. And that's when I saw the ocean again. It was rising. A massive wave, taller than the lighthouse, was coming toward the island. The water churned with bodies, not just people. There were things down there, things that had never been human. Twisted shapes with too many arms, too many teeth. I realized then, this wasn't a storm. It was revenge. I had 1 second to make a choice. Drown with them, or jump. I jumped. They found me washed up on the mainland 2 days later. I told them what happened, but no one believed me. They said I was lucky to be alive. But I'm not. I still hear the song. In my dreams. In the water. In the silence. And I know they are still out there, waiting. If you ever hear the song, don't listen. Don't stop. Run. Because once you hear it, it never lets you go. They found her on the rocks at dawn, tangled in seaweed and shimmering with the last light of the moon. Her eyes were open but lifeless, her hair dark as the ocean depths. No one knew how long she had been there, but the fishermen gathered around her like moths to flame. She wasn't human. The tale gave that away. Sleek, silver scales glistening with salt. A mermaid. I was there that morning, watching from the edge of the crowd. My father was among the fishermen who carried her to the village square. They spoke in hushed voices about what she might be worth. The mayor arrived soon after, eyes wide with greed. He ordered the creature taken to the marketplace to be displayed. By midday, the whole town had gathered. People gawked at her. Children tried to touch her cold skin, and merchants argued over who had the right to sell her remains. No one thought to question why she had washed ashore. No one wondered if we should leave her be. The butcher was the first to suggest we eat her. Fish is fish, he said with a shrug. Why waste it? At first, everyone laughed. Then someone else agreed, and another. Before long, they were building a fire. My father hesitated. This isn't right, he muttered. She's not just some fish. But the mayor had made up his mind. We've been blessed with a gift, he said, and we'll not waste it. I watched in horror as they cut her apart. Her flesh was pale as moonlight, soft as silk. They cooked it over an open flame. The smell thickened the air. I wanted to run, but I stayed. frozen, horrified. When the meat was served, the town feasted. They laughed, they drank, they praised the gods for their good fortune. I didn't eat. I couldn't. But those who did, they changed. It started with dreams. They spoke of the ocean calling to them, of songs that echoed in their minds long after they woke. My father was among them. He said the song was beautiful, said it made him feel whole. But then the dreams turned to something darker. By the third night, my father woke screaming. He clawed at his chest, gasping for air. "It's inside me," he cried. "It wants out." I tried to help him, but there was nothing I could do. His body convulsed violently, bones snapping under his skin. I watched in horror as something tore its way out of him, something with pale, slimy skin and hollow black eyes. It was her, or something that looked like her. She gazed at me for a moment, head tilted, before slithering out the window and disappearing into the night. I thought it was over. I was wrong. By morning, half the town was dead. Each one who had eaten her flesh suffered the same fate, bodies torn open from the inside, birthing more of those things. The creatures didn't stay human for long. Their skin darkened like rotting flesh, their bones twisted unnaturally, and their mouths stretched far wider than they should. They didn't just return to the sea. They hunted. We tried to fight back. Spears, knives, fire, nothing worked. They dragged people screaming into the waves, and those who weren't dragged changed. But the worst part wasn't their hunger. It was their song. It started as a hum in the distance, soft and sweet. Then it grew louder, wrapping around us like a fog. I saw grown men drop their weapons and walk straight into the ocean with tears streaming down their faces. I saw mothers hand their babies to the waves as if entranced. I saw my friends drown with smiles on their faces. I fled with the few who were left. We ran until our legs gave out, but the song followed. It's still following. And now, as I write this by candlelight in the hollow of an old church, I can hear it again. Soft, gentle, calling.